Hello, this is Georgia Stathis at starcycles.com. Also, alexandriabase.org, which is our free global database to find anything astrology that you're looking for. What I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next few shorts is about the new ingress of Chiron, which is a comet, ingressing, entering the sign of Taurus around June 19th, 2026. This very rare shift, which happens around every 51 or 52 years, depending on its orbit, does bring changes, obviously. But first, let's talk a little bit about what Chiron is and what it is not. It's a comet. It is not a planet. But it's been around. We found it around the late 70s. And when it was discovered, that was basically the beginning of the holistic health movement, which happened in the late 70s as we went into about 79 when Saturn entered Virgo. When it was discovered, I think it was probably November of 76 or 77. The timing was perfect because it was also when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross began her very groundbreaking work, very different kind of work on how to deal with death and dying, the 5 stages of dying, and which prompted the hospice movement. So Chiron, because it is a comet, it orbits between, very interesting, between Saturn is very traditional thinking. Saturn is the last planet we can see with our eyes. The ancients really couldn't see beyond Saturn. So in many ways, Saturn does represent what we experience as our limitation. And it orbits between Saturn and Uranus, which is outside of the visible field. And Uranus is the outrageous, revolutionary, out-of-the-box thinker, the revolutionary who brings change, whether we like it or not. So Chiron acts as a bridge, which has often been what it has been called, a bridge. Barbara Hand Clow called it the Rainbow Bridge. Many books have been written about Chiron. Melanie Reinhardt, Chiron, The Healing Journey. So many books have been. Joyce Mason was a specialist. She wrote a whole series of publications called the Chironicles, which we are looking for our Alexandria base special collections. If anybody out there has some, I'd love to get them. So I think it's important to talk about what that means. And when I wrote Business Astrology 101 way back in 2000, I saw Chiron energy as a hybrid energy, taking the good of the old structured things that are still good and sustainable and combining them with outside the box thinking, with a new way of thinking using more traditional, stable kinds of elements. And so, as with any planet or comet, whenever it enters a sign, so I don't know if we'll see changes between June 19th and September 17th, because Chiron will only go to 0 degrees. It's very small, very short in terms of its time here, at least this year, because usually in horary astrology, you have to wait till things get to about 3 degrees of a sign to really get what's happening. But I have to say, I think that we are going to start to see cracks in the foundational system of finance. And I don't know if we're totally going to see the cracks until closer to August through November of 2027, when Chiron and Pluto will be square to each other at that point. And Chiron will be squaring the North Node in early degrees of Aquarius in 2027. But still, there's little cracks. Yet, cracks always require creativity, because when you're missing something, or when something's missing, things have to change. So that's kind of what I wanted to address today. What does Chiron and Taurus mean? And maybe go back first historically about what happened the last couple of times it has been here, because it takes about 50 some years to go. So I want to go way, way back to right after the Great Depression, 1929 through early 1930s. Chiron was actually where it is right now, in late degrees of Aries. And I'm going to be talking about that in a little moment. Around March of 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was inaugurated. That's when they used to inaugurate presidents, in March. And within a very short period of time, to answer the call of the breakdown of what had happened in the financial system in the United States, he began his list of social programs during that time. When Chiron went into Taurus, again, it's an invention kind of comet, because It orbits between Saturn, which is what we need to survive, and Uranus, which is another way of looking at things. But Uranus also rules groups of people, the big picture, the greater cosmic populace, so that he came up with these social programs which would help a greater amount of people rather than just a few. This happened around 1933 and 34 and 35. He started believe it or not, we did not have FDIC guaranteeing our bank money before the Depression and before 1933. He started FDIC somewhere around Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation around 1933. He started the Emergency Bank Relief Act after the banks were closed in 1933 because they were needing to be certified for reopening under new supervision because they were giving a bunch of money out, but they weren't having enough backup in the banks. So there was bank holidays in March of 1933. And after that, he started the Emergency Bank Relief Act. He started things like the Civilian Conservation Corps, where for 9 years, 3 million men had shelter, had food, had clothing. They were unemployed and unmarried, and they helped build the country. He started the WPA. Social Security began around 1935. So it was a massive change in terms of finance. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is the ruler of the second house. The second house is money and how we spend it, our value system. This was a cross-pollination time of our value system where he came up with solutions that nobody else had come up with. And so that was around the 1933 through around 1940. Now, if you fast forward to the next cycle, right before the next Chiron ingress into Taurus, which was around June of 1976, there was a growth in feminism. Ms. Magazine had started. There was a fight by Phyllis Schlafly to fight the Equal Rights Amendment. It was stopped by her. But there was a lot of issues around freedom and individual rights that came up around Chiron in Aries, where it is right now. But once Chiron entered Taurus in June of 1976, and it stayed in Taurus all the way through about February of 1981, and finally June to July of 83, it was in late degrees of Taurus. Once that happened, we did have, let's put it this way, an adjustment in terms of our economy. This is when we had the oil crisis. Interesting, we're having an oil crisis now. And you had to wait in lines. For those of you who weren't around at that time, you had to go on the even days and odd days to get gasoline. This was also during the Carter years. And whether you liked Jimmy Carter or not as a president, one of his legacies that he started was Habitat for Humanity, which helped build homes for the disenfranchised so that they could build lives. And so that was happening in the late 70s. And we had a recession during that time because Chiron in Taurus is about a correction of what's been happening with money. And as we move through the summer, and I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but at the end of July of 2026, on the 26th of July to be precise, the North Node will enter Aquarius. It has been in very early degrees of Pisces, and now it's going to go backwards into Aquarius at the end of July. And right around that same time, a few days before, Jupiter will be entering Leo on June 30th. So I've been looking at that one as well, because once June 30th shows up of 2026, Jupiter's going to be at 0 degrees of Leo. Chiron is going to be at 0 degrees of Taurus. Jupiter and Chiron will be squaring each other. And, Jupiter, as with all the planets have their good side and their bad sides. But Jupiter is expansion and optimism and big visions and big thinking and big landscapes. But the downside of Jupiter is it overextends itself. So Jupiter going to 0 Leo, square Chiron at 0 Taurus throughout the summer would suggest that there is a check on overextending oneself and double checking where you're putting your money, because a lot of these new financial, and I'm not a SEC person, I do a lot of investing, but a lot of the new financial instruments are designed to have more flexibility with finance, like taking your 401k and being able now to invest it in private equity. These are the kinds of things. My suggestion is to think before you act, because Jupiter, 0 Leo, square Chiron at 0 Taurus could be, there's an old saying, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it must be a duck, right? Just because it looks good and sounds good doesn't mean it's good, because we also have Pluto. Even though Pluto did retrograde around 5 degrees of Aquarius, it's moving back to 3 degrees by October of this year. Pluto is in there saying, wait a minute, do a little research. Look into what other options are available before you go plunking down a bunch of your investment money or your time even. And I think this will be a very important thing going into late summer for the next year and a half, because when the North Node goes back into 29 Aquarius, the South Node, which is the letting go of old habits node, is going to go into Leo. And over the next year and a half, it's going to be running with Jupiter. So the South Node moving through Leo would suggest letting go of the ego, letting go of being too overly extended, letting go of thinking you're the cat's meow, as we used to say, as my mom used to say, letting go of that and really starting to think with the North Node going into Aquarius, how can I work with other people who are like-minded to build something? Because I do feel once this North Node goes into Aquarius and moves backwards through end of August of 27 through November of 27, where Pluto will meet it, is that if you've done the work, if you've done the research, if you've built a team that is powerful and strong and on the right value track, and I think this is the big issue with Chiron in Taurus, is what are your values? If they're good values, you'll be fine. If the values have been a little warped, the Chiron in Taurus is going to send you a reality check about, maybe I should recheck my value system. Because I do think, if we look at the bigger cosmic picture now, there's a lot of issues around what we value and what we don't value, how some values are good and some values maybe are just something we were taught or something we were brought up on. In September at United Astrology Congress, I'm one of the speakers there, and I'm going to be doing 2 tracks. One, of course, is one of my favorite topics, rulerships, the 3-dimensional look. But I'm also, and I've been working on how to present this, Saturn, the anatomy of fear. And that's the piece that I'd like you to think about as we move into the summer months. And we'll be talking more about this in the next few weeks, because Saturn is now in the sign of Aries, which is ruled by Mars. This is about waiting before you take an action. Saturn, Mars, waiting and asking questions, waiting and doing the research. The sextiles, which are really good aspects, they're about a 60-degree distance between Saturn and Pluto, are going to help you with that activity. But be careful, because June 19th through September 17th, Chiron will be in Taurus. There'll be a lot of issues coming up around relationships as well, whether they're professional or personal relationships, reviewing them. And the truth of the matter is, as Barbara DeAngelis used to say, Barbara DeAngelis was a great relationship writer. She wrote some great books and a great lecturer. And she said something a long time ago, and that's how I'll close today's podcast. She said, you can love someone till the cows come home. But if you don't share the same values, it never really works. And so part of this summer, as we have Chiron going into Taurus, meeting up with the square to Jupiter, is to really take an assessment of your closest relationships. Do you share the same values? Maybe you do, but you haven't discussed it. Maybe you don't. And the question then becomes, is this the person I want to spend the rest of my time in my business or in my factory or in my home or in my relationship or in my close friends, circle of friends? This is Chiron in Taurus. And healing what can be healed, because Chiron is also, he was a healer. He was a hands-on healer. He could put his hands on you. Chiropractic comes from the name Chiron. He was a hands-on healer. So can I heal the relationships I'm in? Have I overindulged my relationships? Do I need to be more truthful in my relationships? Which also means you're taking a risk. But then again, time is passing and it's passing quickly. So with that said, there is a shift happening. Right now, until we get to June 19th, Chiron will be at 29 degrees of Aries, where it will again return to in the fall before it permanently enters Taurus in the spring of next year. And when I did look back in time to see the last time Chiron was at 29 degrees, that was, believe it or not, an Ebola outbreak, as well as Legionnaire's disease, which I thought was very interesting. It was during the Carter years as it was transitioning from Aries to Taurus. So I'll be talking more about this over the next few weeks, but this is a little introduction to talk about you and how Chiron and Taurus may be affecting you. As we do the next few weeks, I'll talk about the different signs and how it might affect them, especially if you know your rising sign. So with that said, this is Georgia Stathis at starcycles.com. And if you need to do any research for astrology or finding a book or for a lecture, go to alexandriaibase.org. We're doing a campaign. We've been around for 16 years now, and we're doing a whole rebranding of our website by September. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you real soon.